The word was on your tongue. No, I can't. That doesn't work for me. And then you watched yourself say yes instead, again. And now you're committed to something you don't want to do, with someone you don't want to do it with, and you're already exhausted by the performance you'll have to give when the time comes. You're not sure exactly when this started, this automatic agreement, this reflexive accommodation of everyone else's needs at the expense of your own. But you know it's been running so long you can barely remember what wanting something actually feels like. Not wanting to please someone, not wanting to avoid conflict, but genuinely wanting something for yourself without first calculating how it will land with everyone else in your life. You've noticed that certain words don't exist in your vocabulary, or they exist only in your head, never making it to your mouth. No, I disagree. That doesn't work for me. Actually, I'd prefer something else. These phrases feel dangerous, like touching a hot stove, like stepping into traffic. Other people seem to say them without consequence, but you know in your bones that for you, these words carry a price too high to pay. So you say yes. You say sure. You say, I don't mind, whatever you want. That's fine. I'm easy. You become a mirror, reflecting back whatever will make the interaction smooth, whatever will keep the other person comfortable, whatever will prevent the tension you can feel building the moment you consider asserting yourself. People call you easygoing. They call you flexible, laid back, low maintenance. They have no idea that behind every easy yes is a small death, a tiny piece of you sacrificed on the altar of keeping the peace. They have no idea how much work you're doing, constantly, invisibly, to make sure no one ever has a reason to be upset with you. You think about where this came from, and the memories aren't dramatic, they rarely are. There's no obvious villain in your story, no clear moment where everything changed, but you remember the feeling, if not the specifics. The atmosphere of a home where certain emotions weren't safe, the parent whose mood determined the weather for everyone else, the understanding, absorbed before you could question it, that your job was to manage the emotions of the people around you, to anticipate and accommodate, to shape yourself into whatever would create the least friction. Maybe conflict in your house was explosive, and you learned that keeping quiet kept you safe. Maybe love was withdrawn when you expressed needs, and you learned that needs were dangerous. Maybe you had a parent who was overwhelmed or depressed, or simply absent in ways that made you feel responsible for their emotional well-being. Whatever the specifics, the lesson was clear. Your feelings are less important than their comfort. Your needs are an inconvenience. Your survival depends on making yourself useful, agreeable, invisible in your own wants. The psychological term for what you developed is the fawn response. You've heard of fight, flight, and freeze, the ways humans respond to threat, but there's a fourth response, less talked about, and it might explain your entire life. When faced with danger, you don't fight back, you don't run, you don't shut down, you appease. You become whatever the threat needs you to be. You sacrifice yourself to survive. This was adaptive once. When you were small and dependent on people who held power over your life, fawning worked. It kept you connected to caregivers you needed. It de-escalated situations you couldn't escape. It was the smartest strategy available to a child who had no other options. But here's what happens when you carry a survival strategy into contexts where it's no longer needed. It stops being protection and starts being prison. You're not a child anymore. The people in your life now aren't the people you had to manage as a kid. Most of them would actually prefer your honesty to your performance. But your nervous system doesn't know this. It's still running the old program, still scanning for threats, still responding to the slightest hint of displeasure with immediate accommodation. You live in a state of chronic self-abandonment, and you're so used to it you don't even notice anymore. Until you do. Until some night like tonight, when you're lying awake thinking about all the times you said yes when you meant no, all the relationships that exist only because you've contorted yourself to maintain them, all the resentment building up inside you that has nowhere to go because you keep swallowing it, keep smiling, keep pretending everything is fine when nothing has been fine for years. The exhaustion you feel isn't from your job or your responsibilities or your lack of sleep. It's from the constant, invisible labor of being someone you're not. It's from monitoring every interaction for signs of what the other person needs and immediately providing it. It's from the gap between who you are inside and who you perform for the world. A gap so wide now that you're not sure you could find your real self if you had permission to look. You notice how you feel around different people. With some, you can almost relax, almost let the mask slip. With others, you become a version of yourself so accommodating it barely resembles a person, more like a function, a service, a thing designed to make their life easier. You watch yourself laughing at jokes that aren't funny, agreeing with opinions you don't hold, nodding along to plans you dread. And part of you screams every time, but that part has been screaming so long you've learned to tune it out. You think about what would happen if you started saying no. The thought itself creates anxiety, a physical sensation of danger. You imagine the disappointment on their faces, the confusion, the possible anger. You imagine being called difficult, selfish, not a team player. You imagine relationships ending, invitations stopping, being left alone because you finally stopped being useful. These fears feel so real that they override any desire for authenticity. But here's what you haven't tested. Most of these fears are projections from childhood, not predictions of adult reality. The parent who withdrew love when you had needs is not the friend asking you for a favor. The explosive household you had to manage is not your current relationship. You've been responding to ghosts, protecting yourself from threats that no longer exist, paying a tax that's no longer required. Some people will struggle when you start having boundaries. Some relationships won't survive your authenticity, and this tells you something important about what those relationships were actually built on. But others will deepen. Others will feel relief when you finally tell them the truth, when you stop performing, when you trust them enough to say no and discover they love you anyway. The first time you say no, it will feel like standing at the edge of a cliff. Your nervous system will flood with alarm. Every instinct will scream that you've made a terrible mistake. But you do it anyway, and the world doesn't end. The person doesn't leave. The relationship absorbs the boundary and continues, and something cracks open in you. The realization that you've been living in a cage with an unlocked door, that the prison was built from fears you never tested, that your voice has existed all along underneath the performance, waiting for permission to speak. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to have needs. You're allowed to say, no, I can't. That doesn't work for me. I'd prefer something else. You're allowed to let some relationships end rather than continue abandoning yourself to maintain them. You're allowed, finally, after all these years of disappearing, to exist.